Hello, my beautiful doves. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if this is your first time around, if this is your first rodeo. My name is Mina, and today's topic is going to be about standardized sizing. So you may be wondering, Mina, what is standardized sizing? Well, the size labels that are attached to virtually every modern ready-to-wear garment that we own. They're either numbered, like 246. Different countries have different sizing systems. So we're mainly going to talk about the US because that's where I live and that's where I'm most familiar with. You also get size labels that have letters on them like S, M, and L. So today we're going to be addressing all the questions you may have about this arbitrary, confusing system. How did a size 4 come to mean a 26-inch waist? Why are vintage sizes so different from contemporary sizes? And why are there basically no clothes that go beyond a size XL? And was Marilyn Monroe really plus sized? Let's get into it. We gotta start with the history. Sorry if this part is a little doozy, but it's important, trust me. We gotta understand how this all came to be, So the development of mass-produced clothing actually has roots in wartime in the 18th century. Large standing armies required large quantities of uniforms, so clothing contractors like Richard Lowe would produce hundreds of thousands of uniforms for the soldiers. So in the ready-made business, men's clothes had a bit of a head start compared to women's clothes. By 1850, men's clothing was the largest manufacturing enterprise in New York City, which was the largest manufacturing city in the country. This clothing revolution was seen as a marker of true Republican progress. The United States Magazine and Democratic Review wrote, "Articles of clothing are now at the command of the lowest members of society, which but a century since were scarcely within the reach of crowned heads." Women, on the other hand, still preferred custom garments, mainly because women's fashion dictated a tight, corseted silhouette, which was hard to produce in mass. Like if we look at early ready-made men's clothing, the fit is pretty loose. It's pretty casual. If you're a lady, that's just not happening, like immediately worse dressed at the ball. Sometimes tailors would sell completed pieces, kind of like sample pieces, I guess, if we wanted to make a modern day equivalent. But unfortunately, these clothes were kind of a flop because they usually required further tailoring afterwards to make them a little bit more snatched. Winifred Aldrich claims that it was the change in women's fashion at the turn of the century that was the largest single factor that allowed the development of cheap, ready-made clothing for women. You see, Paris fashions from 1908 to 1913 shifted from the tightly corseted figure to a looser, soft cylinder shape that could then be flattened and translated into basic rectangle patterns, similar to patterns that we have today. Around this time, the US started to draft sizing manuals for women's wholesale manufacturers, but from magazine and newspaper testimonials of the time, we can see that size standardization had much to be desired. A retail executive wrote in a 1927 New York Times article, "I don't know who the mythical size 36 is who forms the basis of sizing, but average, tall, short, thin, and plump women come into a department store and the 36 size fits none of them." Emily C. Davis wrote an article published in 1930 in the Science newsletter saying, "Women are complaining because of the time and money they must spend in having clothes refitted at the stores, and retailers are disturbed at the expense involved in the maintenance of large alteration departments, and the loss of goodwill and money in returned goods and controversies over unsatisfactorily fitted garments." So, two statisticians, Ruth O'Brien and I always forget the man's name, William Shelton, conducted the first large-scale survey measuring women and children's bodies between 1939 and 1941. In their study, they measured approximately 15,000 women and took 59 measurements in hopes of being able to find some kind of proportional relationship between the different measurements of the body that could then be translated to a simple sizing system. Surprise, surprise, they arrived at no such proportional relationship because women are built in all shapes and sizes with no real rhyme or reason. It wasn't until almost 1958 when the National Bureau of Standards finally took a look at the data and came up with an official commercial system. Women's sizes were now derived from the bust, with all other measurements proportional to an hourglass figure, and these measurements were represented on even numbers from 8 to 38. I just also want to mention that if you ever see a vintage item with a half size, like 8.5, for instance, these half sizes were sometimes used to indicate that the garment was shorter, so it was made for a petite woman. Sometimes half sizes could also mean that the garment was plus sized. And odd numbers were used to denote junior sizing, so don't be shocked if you find any old clothes with odd number labeling. When people say Marilyn Monroe was a size 12, I can see why they would think she is a modern size large, because that's what that size corresponds to these days. But back in the 1950s, her dressmaker actually said Marilyn had a 22-inch waist and 35-inch hips. However, enthusiasm for this system waned over time, and by 1983, the government withdrew the standard completely. And thus, chaos was born. I mean, to be fair, there was a lot of discontent with the standard. O'Brien and Shelton only took measurements of white women. Women of color did show up to get measured, and they just scrapped their data. Very nice. They also offered a stipend to volunteers, and so people realized that the results kind of skewed towards poor and malnourished women. Starting around the 1970s, we also have the new concept of vanity sizing, which, for anyone who's not familiar, is the reason why a dress that has the same measurements for a size 12 in 1958 would be redefined as a size 6 by 2011, which I will expand on in a little bit. So that's numerical sizing. Alpha sizing, which are the letters S, M, and L, didn't come about until around the 90s. According to the Wall Street Journal, alpha sizing arrived with the increased popularity of relaxed clothing and sportswear. Think, baggy t-shirts and yoga pants that relied less on exact fit. Speaking of ill-fitting clothes, so I conducted a little poll on my Patreon where I asked my patrons what they thought about standardized sizing, and I got a range of answers, but most of them skewed towards the negative, which I'm not really surprised about. One of my patrons wrote, "I think what bothers me the most about standardized sizing is that it's really not standard at all across different brands. I wear different size jeans in Levi's, Gold, Free People, BDG, etc. It's especially frustrating when this happens within brands of the same group. I always have to size down for Free People and Anthropologie clothes, but at Urban Outfitters, I have to be true to size or sometimes size up." One of the main reasons why we get so much size differentiation is because of vanity sizing, which I mentioned earlier. So the definition of vanity sizing is the labeling of clothes with sizes smaller than the actual cut of the items. This is clear in how sizes have changed over the years, but also explains why sizes differentiate now between contemporary brands, because it's basically just up to the brand's discretion what they choose to make a size M or a size L. For instance, Esquire writer Abram Sauer tested men's pants produced by common brands like H&M, Calvin Klein, Gap, and Old Navy, and found that the actual measurements were often 2 to 3 inches larger than the indicated size. The Old Navy pants he looked at measured 5 inches bigger than the size they were labeled as. So what is the point of vanity sizing? It sounds like all it's designed to do is create a lot of confusion for buyers. Well, the Journal of Consumer Psychology found that smaller size labels actually increase the self-esteem of customers, and larger size labels decrease their self-esteem. This is how it works. So say you walk into a store and you've gained a little bit of quarantine weight, which is not a bad thing, by the way. That's not a bad thing. You have been a size 8 for most of your adult life. You go into the store that has had consistent sizing for several years now, and you try on a dress marked a size 8, and it feels really tight. It doesn't really fit. Then let's say you go to a store with more inconsistent sizing, like, H&M, and you try on a dress marked size 8 there, and it fits perfectly. The gag is that this H&M size 8 dress is actually 2 to 3 inches larger than the average size 8 dress, so really it's a size 10. But because the dress is marked a size 8, you feel validated, you didn't actually gain that much weight. And the consequence is you probably will buy the dress, and you'll probably have a better impression of H&M as a company. You see how the fashion industry just likes to feed on people's body insecurities? As a disclaimer, I do want to be transparent. I've definitely dealt with my own handful of body and weight issues throughout my entire life, and it's taken years of work to unlearn. And even now, I recognize I will continue to have to unlearn because, bodies are meant to change throughout life, and I know my body now is going to look different than my body in, 10 years. I don't want to come off as too preachy because I can't really know experiences that aren't mine. But I just really, really want the best for all of us, which is why I'm about to say this whole spiel. In general, I think it's really damaging when people buy clothes that are sizes smaller because they feel like there's a stigma buying clothes that actually fit them. Lingerie expert Cora Harrington, and let me just say, I think Cora is so wise, and I've really appreciated reading all of the things that she's ever had to say. That's probably the saddest thing about me deactivating Twitter, is that I don't get to see Cora's tweets anymore. She's really amazing. But anyway, she did an interview with Jezebel where she talks about bra sizes, but I feel like this point can be, across the board. Basically, she talks about how there's a stigma for sizes above a D cup. So she says like a lot of people who would be more comfortable wearing, say, a 30F bra will wear this uncomfortable 38D because of this stigma, which sucks because an ill-fitting bra is literally like medieval torture. In another study I read, the authors stated women can monitor changes of body size by the fit of their clothes. They identify with their clothes' size and blame their own bodies if clothes do not fit. When this link between body and clothes size is disrupted and the familiar size is replaced by a larger size, it causes discomfort and body dissatisfaction. There are studies that women will buy dress sizes 1 or 2 sizes smaller because they feel like this will incentivize them to lose weight so that they can eventually fit into these dresses. That's not healthy, and honestly, I have a lot of skirts and pants that don't have a stretchy waist because they're vintage, and so if I don't fit into them anymore, I try to donate them or give them to friends like immediately, because I think it's just healthier to enjoy living in the present rather than focusing all your happiness on this hypothetical future that you may not even reach. And I know that if I keep these clothes with me, I'll just keep fixating on this one day that I'll eventually be able to wear this skirt again. Dieting is not a bad thing, by the way, like inherently, I'm not saying that, but I just think that if you do choose a diet, you should do so with the goal of feeling better in your body and feeling healthier, which is such an individual thing that also depends on your unique body type. So back to vanity sizing. If smaller size labels make people feel good, why don't all brands just add 2 to 3 inches to their clothing sizes? So here's the interesting thing. The same study that found the link between self-esteem and clothing size also found that people who had their self-esteem lowered would engage in this practice called compensatory consumption, which is the act of buying things without size labels, like say jewelry or makeup, to then boost their self-esteem. So retailers win either way, it seems.
You know what's the most exciting thing about winning? It's when you win. I love that feeling.
And this is all just alluding to this bigger problem where clothes are no longer meant to fit us. We are meant to fit into the clothes. And I don't really know how to reconcile with this because bespoke tailoring is just so expensive. It's so inaccessible. It takes a long time to order something custom made. And so if you order like a week in advance to your friend's birthday party, you are not going to get that dress in time. And these garments can't actually be returned if you decide you don't actually like this design anymore, because the garment was literally created to fit you and only you. It can't be resold again. Standardized sizing also makes it easier to shop online. One of my patrons, for instance, pointed out, I would find it really difficult to have to search Poshmark by typing in my measurements or measurements of the items. Between all the different ways you can measure clothing, flat lay versus circumference, inseam versus total length, it just feels too time consuming and error prone. I think it's much easier to click SM or 468 to narrow down my initial search, then check the size guide or measurements on the garments I'm interested in. That said, standardized sizing on its own, not accompanied by sizing guides or garment measurements, is completely useless. Inefficient sizing and lack of accurate size charts can actually contribute to clothing waste and environmental pollution too. If you are producing a lot of clothes that just don't fit a lot of people, especially in the age of online shopping, when it also costs more to the environment to ship this particular item to this individual person and for that person to ship it back, companies are kind of enabling people to throw out their clothes that don't fit, especially when these clothes are bought on final sale and can't be returned. There's also this problem where lots of people don't even fit into these so-called average sizes because for women's clothes, these measurements are so heavily based on the hourglass proportion. Sorry, I can't be her. In the early 2000s, the Textile Clothing Technology Corporation conducted a widespread study of almost 11,000 women's bodies using body scanners, and these women ranged from age 18 to age 80. The main finding was that women's bodies have increased in size over the years, so you would think that we would update our sizing system to reflect this new average. The study also noted 5 to 7 different body shapes, with only 8% of women having the hourglass shape. And finally, I just want to address the lack of certain size clothing, mainly plus size clothing.
Do you have this shirt in a large? A large? Was that like French for extra small?
So in 2019, Elise D'Alessandro posted this tweet regarding Savage X Fenty. S to extra L versus 1X to 3X. I understand construction cannot always be the same for plus size, especially in lingerie, but I know you can do strappy bralettes in plus, so why do brands do this? Curve model Ashley Chubby Bunny on Instagram similarly told Teen Vogue, other brands that cater to plus sizes have no problem creating the same or even sexier lingerie for plus sizes. Ashley believes that the design disparity stems from the cultural belief that only certain types of women should be allowed to show off skin. These are very valid points, but I do want to note that lingerie production is a bit more complicated than regular clothing production, and Cora Harrington wrote about Savage X Fenty in a 2018 blog post, and what she says is pretty interesting. So Rihanna partnered with Textile to create Savage X Fenty, and Textile has never made intimate apparel before. Cora says, partnering with a company that has no prior history of producing a bra line has repercussions for the size range as well. In this case, the maximum cup size is double D, which is the absolute outer edge of what could be considered core sizing. The double D/E cup mark is a size break where the pattern and construction of the bra needs to change. And it's no easy task. A new size range can literally take years to produce. Even if Textile is going the private label route, it would still take time to research and contract with these companies who would then still need to produce a product that aligns with the rest of the range. Okay, so I realized I have to re-record this part because when I was editing, I think the way I worded this the first time, maybe lawsuit worthy. I don't know, we're not taking any chances. So anyway, I'm sharing all this information because I want to paint a more objective picture of what might be happening. But with all that said, I still think that in this case, there is some at least implicit bias against fat people, just from looking at the way that these two models are posed. Like the slim model is posed really confidently and the curve model is hiding her stomach. So yeah. I also don't know if Savage X Fenty has made newer, better collections since this happened because it was a couple years ago. I don't really keep up with them anymore because they're not very transparent with their production practices, so that kind of makes me uncomfortable. You should also watch Mia's video on Savage X Fenty because I thought that was pretty informative and it gives you a clear picture of the company's antics. Anyways, as of 2019, 68% of US women wear a size 14 and above, and only 10% of mass market apparel and 0.6% of luxury apparel are categorized as plus size. And yes, before anyone says anything, I do understand that there are costs in creating a plus size range, like we already dipped our toes into that for the Savage X Fenty thing. But I did read an interview with Denise Lee, the founder of Alala. And currently Alala does have a size range up to 3X. And she said, we had to make new patterns for every single style in a 1X. That costs time and money to make all new patterns. It's much more expensive to do that than to just tell the factory to grade up the pattern from a small to a 3X. In saying that, there's really no excuse for larger brands, especially the luxury sector, which has a ton of money. Like 0.6% of a luxury sector catering to plus size is really unacceptable because they have so much money. They have so much money to invest in resources and to hire on people who can design for plus size. At this point, they're at best not prioritizing a huge sector of the population. According to Tim Gunn's 2016 article for the Washington Post, ModCloth's customer survey noted that its plus-size shoppers place 20% more orders than its straight-size customers. And at worst, they're straight up fat phobic. Lest we forget, CEO of Abercrombie, Mike Jeffries.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
And this one interview he did where he said, candidly, we go after cool kids. We go after the attractive all-American kid with a great attitude and a lot of friends. A lot of people don't belong in our clothing, and they can't belong. Are we exclusionary? Absolutely. Those companies that are in trouble are trying to target everybody, young, old, fat, skinny. But then you become totally vanilla. You don't alienate anybody, but you don't excite anybody either. Okay then. According to one study I read, the groups that have the most problem finding clothes are unsurprisingly plus-size women, the elderly, and disabled people. And I feel like it's obvious, but the reason we need more inclusive sizes is not for some silly aesthetic reason, even though that should be a good enough reason too, because like skinny people are allowed to be just like aesthetic and experimental, then fat people should also be allowed to be. Anyways, the authors of the study write, wearing the right clothes with a good fit contributes to the confidence and comfort of the wearer, both physically and socially. Being inappropriately dressed for an occasion can cause feelings of awkwardness and vulnerability. So in conclusion, I don't really have a remedy for this entire problem because I'm one person, and also I understand that standardized sizing is more cost effective for businesses, but also for people as well. Because as we talked about earlier, bespoke tailoring is expensive. You'd have to live near a dressmaker, and you would have to be so sure in what you're buying that you know you would never return it, which is a lot to ask for a lot of people. So we're back. I realized that the first take I did, the conclusion just didn't sound positive enough. Like, it was more doom and gloom, and that's not how I'm trying to be on this channel. So I slept on it, and now I'm back with different words. Fortunately, we are moving forward to more diversity, more gender inclusion, more different bodies on the runway, but it is a slow progress, and it definitely could be better, especially when tokenism is involved. Like, let's not go down that route, please. I think what's important here is, just keeping up the momentum, because as much power as these brands have, like, they depend on consumers as well. And boycotting does work, especially in the age of social media, where it's a lot easier to organize and spread information. If a brand is not catering to all its customers, if they don't have ethical practices, if they don't have sustainable practices, it's up to all of us to join hands in this situation, not just the people who are directly affected. From one skinny bitch to another, please stop shopping at Brandy Melville. Like, they suck and their clothes are ugly anyway. And for anyone who walks into a store and feels bad about themselves, I really just want to read some of Tim Gunn's words that he said in that interview I cited earlier. This is a design failure and not a customer issue. There is no reason larger women can't look just as fabulous as all other women. The key is the harmonious balance of silhouette, proportion, and fit, regardless of size or shape. Okay, that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think about standardized sizing, how this affects you. I guess how it doesn't. Actually, no, I don't want to hear it if it doesn't affect you. Yeah, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you for spending some time with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.